Today we're going to be talking about how to survive an FDA inspection. My name is Etienne Nichols. I'm the Community Manager and Medical Device Guru here at Greenlight Guru. I'll be your moderator for today's event. We've got a really special presentation scheduled for you today. I know our presenter, Anne Holland, is really looking forward to sharing some preventative actions that your medical device company can take to prepare for a successful FDA inspection and minimize the possibility of receiving a 483. Before we dive too deep into today's presentation and introduce our presenter and her consultancy, QA Consulting, I'm going to touch on a few items real quick. First, today's webinar is going to run for about 90 minutes in total. It will include a Q&A session at the end where Anne will answer questions from the live audience. So I encourage you to go ahead and submit those questions throughout the webinar as we go in the question side there. We'll get to as many of those as time permits. For those of you who want to learn even more about FDA inspections after today's webinar, provided suppose we don't get to all of your questions, we will be hosting an AMA, which is short for an Ask Me Anything session on Wednesday, June 22nd, where today's presenter Anne will be answering live audience questions on today's webinar topic. So we'll be talking more about FDA inspections. We'll include a link to where you can sign up for that in our follow-up email. We'll be sending that to all registrants with the full webinar recording and slides after today's presentation. I'd also like to share a few words about Greenlight Guru and why we put on these free training sessions. If you participated in any of our training sessions before, then you know we put these on because improving the quality of life is our mission here at Greenlight Guru. It's likely a similar mission to many of you who are tuning in now. We're constantly looking for ways to fulfill this mission, whether it's through hosting these free training sessions or by partnering with world-class medical device consultants like today's presenter, Anne, as well as through our award-winning quality management software. For those of you who said you were interested in seeing how Greenlight Guru's audit management workflow can shorten your prep time from weeks to hours and improve inspection and audit outcomes, someone from our team will be reaching out to you after today's webinar. If you haven't connected with us yet, but would like to, simply head over to www.greenlight.guru after the webinar, schedule a brief intro call with us to better understand how our purpose-built solution can serve your medical device needs. In doing so, you'll learn how the very best medical device companies are leveraging our purpose-built quality management software to meet other needs like market approval from the FDA, compliance with EU MDR and IVDR, ISO 1345-2016 certification, as well as breeze through audits and push beyond just baseline compliance to deliver true quality medical devices to patients. Now on to the bulk of today's presentation. Let me give you a proper introduction to your presenter today and a distinguished partner of ours at Greenlight Guru, Anne Holland. Anne combines more than 25 years of biomedical engineering with business acumen as founder and CEO of QA Consulting Incorporated. Under her guidance, QA Consulting has grown from a local Austin-based firm founded in 2000 to one of the leading Hub and WBENC certified medical device consulting firms with clients throughout the nation. She's an expert in every phase of quality assurance, from design concept and R&D through manufacturing, production, and post-market surveillance for Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 medical devices. Anne's expertise has been sought by medical device manufacturers from startup to Fortune 500 to develop and implement compliant solutions that meet their quality and regulatory needs. She's been called on as an expert witness on medical devices and regulatory compliance, and Anne has conducted over 100 supply chain and internal audits. Clients rely on her thorough knowledge of good manufacturing practices, good laboratory practices, and regulatory remediation. She facilitates and responds to FDA and ISO 1345 notified body audits for manufacturers. So I know that's a lot, but without further ado, let me hand it over to your presenter, Anne Holland. Anne, are you able to take it away?
Sure, thank you, Etienne, for that wonderful introduction. I want to first say I appreciate being asked to talk today a little bit about FDA inspections. For good or for bad, as some might say, I've been able to sit through inspections as both an employee in industry and in conjunction with clients. So I've seen it sort of from both sides, but I do want to make sure you know that I am not an FDA inspector myself. I've also been able to work through routine inspections, follow-up inspections, and for cause inspections. So hopefully I can show you insight into each of those types. So I wanted to talk first on a little bit more top level is who does the FDA inspect? Um, I come from the FDA device industry side, but I think we all know that drug manufacturers get inspected. But food processing facilities, um, dairy farms, animal feed processors all get inspected too. And as you can tell by the infant formula shortage and problems, it's important that we keep up on our food processing facilities. The FDA also looks at compounding pharmacies and laboratories that conduct animal studies. Um, those animal studies are then used in submissions to the FDA, so it's very important that they're conducted properly. So if you then look through, this is just, again, some background information, those different areas, and we look at what has been conducted recently or how many. If you look at 2018-19, which is on this slide, there were 4,910 inspections conducted with 966 in medical devices. Then, after COVID hit, there were only 2,811, which is circled, and 422 devices. So that basically cut the device inspections in half. In 2020 to 21, you can see there were only 191 device inspections and a pretty stable number of 2,472 overall inspections. So they kept up their food inspections for the food supply chain, but dropped off in nearly everything else. So I would predict, based on that, and also the fact that COVID is not as prevalent now, that the number of inspections will come back up. And they also have some new tools that can use to do inspections. So we'll get into that in just a moment. Now, I'm not going to read to you what the whole definition of a medical device is. It's pretty long, but basically, a device is governed by the CDRH, Center for Devices and Radiological Health, and it means any instrument, apparatus, machine, contrivance intended for the use of diagnosis or treatment, cure, mitigation of a disease in man or other animals, or it's intended to affect the body structure or function in man or animals. So, basically that can be anything from an orthotic or a blood pressure cuff up to a cardiac defibrillator or a neurostimulator. So just some background that will relate to what's coming up as far as the inspections. The FDA has classified medical devices based on risk. So there's 3 risk classifications. Class 1 is low risk, Class 2 for medium risk, and Class 3 for high risk. So that's a pretty easy way for most of us to remember how it works. If you have, and also the level of controls for each of those classifications goes up. So as one would expect, the lowest risk devices would have the least amount of controls. So they have what are called general controls. They have to register and list with the FDA, and in all of these categories, you have to have not misbranded products and no adulteration. So misbranding means false advertising, incorrect labeling, your website claims something that it shouldn't, or adulterated could mean something like you're not following the quality system regulations, or your product doesn't meet specifications, or it's contaminated. So those are some examples for Class 1. For Class 2, that's a little higher risk. And the picture on this one is of a muscle stimulator. So in class 2 devices, there are general controls like we just talked about, but they're stepping it up to add some special controls. Those could be special tests that are required to be performed, or that's generally what it is, or other specifics for your device. In this case, you also have to do a pre-market notification or a 510K. So you send in your documentation and see if the FDA agrees that you have provided reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness. And then you do have to, like I said, register and list your device and make sure to follow the quality system regulations and not have any mislabeling or misbranding, excuse me, and not have any other problems. So then you go to class 3. Class 3 is the highest level of risk. So these are usually life-supporting or life-sustaining devices or implants. It could be something like a pacemaker, a heart valve. I put a heart valve here because I've worked in heart valves for many years. Breast implant or a cochlear implant. Those are some examples. And in this case, you have to show the FDA in a pre-market approval that you have a safe and effective product based on valid scientific evidence. The class 2 device, you just show it's substantially equivalent to something on the market before 1976. So this is a much higher risk classification, and it's important that you have the reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness, because everyone knows there's no guarantees. So let's move on to FDA inspections. We're going to talk about types of inspections, risk-based inspections, the various types of inspections and methods of inspections, and then how to prepare for inspections, conduct, and follow up on those inspections. So FDA assesses risk levels based on your device classification. That's why I wanted to talk about that a little bit first. They want to look at the history of your company and its products. For example, have you had recalls recently? Has someone called into the FDA with a complaint, for example, that you're mislabeling that product or improper distribution techniques? That could be another reason that you go to a higher risk level. So also your past history of inspections. Has it been 4 years or has it been 2 years? So they put all that information into a magic formula. I don't know that algorithm, and then determine who they're going to visit next. So this risk-based approach was started in 2005 as part of a pharmaceutical quality effort. And the aim of this is just to make sure that the manufacturers are maintaining compliance with good manufacturing practices. And if there is a problem, how do they respond to that? So the FDA will come in and look at your records as well as your procedures and make sure you're doing what you say you're doing and that your procedures are in compliance with the regulations. I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it. That sounds easy, but when it really comes to it, there's a lot of ways that you can mess up. So we're going to talk a little about 483s. So after the FDA comes in, they may issue, they may not, but they may issue a 483 or where they see an objectionable condition or a violation. And on the next slide, you'll see a graphic of the primary categories of the 483s. There we go. And these are always the top, it seems. And they vary slightly, but design controls and CAPAs are always up there. towards the top as our complaint files. And as you'll note a little further down, I'll explain why that comes to be. Purchasing controls and all of the rest of them pale in comparison to those three. So the FDA uses something called a quality system inspection technique. That's their manual that they have used since 1999 to perform their inspections. And what they do is they ask a series of questions for each area. So they will go in, and there is an example here of a flowchart of the questions. They'll ask questions, there we are, of all of the, are there objectionable conditions? Has management, do you have a quality policy? Have you done your management reviews? And at the end, they'll decide whether to move on or continue digging. So the FDA does have a sampling plan they use based on the binomial distribution, and they can select the confidence level that they use and how many records they review based on this QSIT technique.
And I hate to interrupt, sorry. Just to let everyone know, I'm the one controlling the slides, so forgive me if we're bouncing around a little bit. But just Anne, if you want to just tell me when to change slides, I'll do that.
Let's go on and change slides.
Okay.
So the inspection methods traditionally have been all on-site. So an inspector would come to your facility, they would sit there until they're done asking you all the questions. But with the onset of COVID, now there are virtual inspections where they use, Teams or Zoom, just like this, to go through the documents and conduct interviews with both employees and subject matter experts. There are also hybrid inspections, which are a blend of virtual activities and on-site activities. So there's a lot more tools for the FDA to use now in their inspections, and I just wanted to point that out. Change slides. There's also the QSIT manual has a couple of types of inspections or levels of inspection. The level 2 is the full inspection or baseline inspection, where they come in and they look at 4 major sections, and we'll show which 4 next. Those occur when you haven't had a full inspection, and if you did have a previous inspection, they may come back and do a full inspection if there were objectionable conditions. An abbreviated inspection is generally they look at the CAPA subsystem +1. So it is a smaller scope. Next slide. Here's a diagram of from the QSIT manual that talks about the different systems and their subsystems. And when it's a level 2, QSIT baseline inspection, say you have a new product or your new company, they would look at management controls, because we all know that management, I'm sure you know that management sets the tone and the resources for the quality within an organization. They define the culture and how employees do the work. CAPA, we all, again, know that CAPA is super important. That's why it's right up there as far as the areas that have the most 483s. Within the CAPA, they look at medical device reporting, which are derived from complaints. They look at corrections and removals. And if applicable to your device, they would look at your tracking. So that is a very large system. So is design controls. Everyone knows that design controls can be really tricky to comply with, and most teams need guidance on the depth of design controls and to make sure that all deliverables are achieved. But it's not just the deliverables are there, it's the quality of them. So the FDA will look at the quality of the records. And the last one is production and process controls, which includes sterilization processes. So this could be any process: molding, machining, clean rooms. So you need to be prepared for any of those types. Next, please. So one of the questions I've been asked just many times over the years is, does the FDA notify the manufacturer before they come into your facility? Well, many years ago, they didn't always notify you, and they still don't always notify you, but generally they do give a few days, like 3 to 5 days to notify you before a US inspection. Interestingly, they notify foreign manufacturers 2 to 3 months in advance. And so now there's some efforts within the FDA that are trying to make these notification time periods more similar. Because, and this is just my opinion, if you have give someone 2 to 3 months to prepare versus 3 to 5 days to prepare, it can obviously skew the results. So during this notification, the FDA may ask you to send your quality system manual or equivalent to review, but you're not obligated to do that. So you could politely say, we prefer to have you look at it on site. Next. So there are, just like there are a couple of levels of inspections, there's types of inspections. And I mentioned some of these on the very first slide. There are routine inspections. There are compliance follow-up inspections. Those are, say you had a problem previously and they wanted to come and check that your violations have been corrected and to make sure that no other problems have formed. And then there's for cause inspections. And I recently was involved in, or our group was involved in 3 for cause inspections in a matter of 6 months, which seems a bit rare to me, but you don't always know why they're coming in, or in fact, you probably don't know. And they don't necessarily follow the QSIT approach. So these are the toughest types of inspections to prepare for, but that again emphasizes a need to be inspection ready at all times. Next. So now we're going to go into the preparation for the inspection, and then performing the inspection, and then follow-up. So one of the first things that should be done is to develop an SOP stating how to manage an inspection. It could also be put in your quality system manual, or you could put it pretty much wherever you desire, but you need to have it written, reviewed, and approved. So who's going to be the first contact when the FDA shows up on site? That's important. And how will you notify the facility? Like I worked for one company, and this was a long time ago, but they used the intercom system, which it tells you was a long time ago, that they would say, the ice cream truck is out back. And that meant the FDA is on site, everyone go to your work cells, make sure you know your quality policy, and be prepared to answer questions. Maybe in Texas it'd be the taco truck, but it's the same concept. And one more statement on the first contact. There should be a coordinator or an escort that is constantly with the FDA when on site. So that person should also have a backup. So it's important that you think about what to do if that person isn't present when they say the FDA is going to be there. You could have a backup, or you could try to convince the FDA to come another day. I haven't seen much success with asking them to come again, but you never know. Also, you should make sure to document FDA requests for information. So how are you going to do that? How is that back room going to work? There's generally a front room that has the escort and the FDA, and maybe someone who's recording notes. How are you going to communicate with the back room? Those are the people pulling the records, pulling the documents, marking them confidential, recording which documents that go out to the front room. Examples are you going to use Teams chat? Are you going to use Slack? So all of those things should be thought through ahead of time. And another thing that seems to come up for over and over again is how do you handle photographs and videos? And then another key area is with subject matter experts. You know, this is a little tricky because they're experts and oftentimes they want to, show their expertise. So we need to make sure to prepare them on how to behave properly for an FDA inspection. Next. The second thing that's important to do is to practice. Everyone should know their role now. You've written the SOP. And then just like you can't learn the piano if you don't practice, it's similar with an FDA inspection. Everyone should know what they should say, shouldn't say, and we've got a list of those coming up next. What kind of communication methods to use during the inspection. I just hit on that. And the back room that I just explained could really make or break an inspection. So it's important to practice. Use the chats, ask for documents, ask for some things that aren't that clear. It's the coordinators and the people in the front room that are supposed to be clear with what is, excuse me, requested by the FDA. If an incorrect document is given to them, it could open the door up for additional questions. So you just don't want to do that. The back group should give their documents to the coordinator in the front room. They should look at the document or escort and then hand it to the FDA. Practice that a few times, and that will really help when the tensions get higher and the FDA is in the room. Next. So these are some do's and don'ts. I like to go through these. I say I did get these primarily from some other webinars and from books, but basically we're going to start with the don'ts. Never start with the, always start with the negatives, I feel like. So don't sign affidavits. You would think that would be intuitive, but it's not always that way. I've seen people sign things and then wish they hadn't. Get your attorneys on the line and handle it that way. And that should, again, should be in your procedure. Don't argue with people. Don't volunteer to change or approve documents. Sometimes that works. If you can say, oh, I'll change that by the morning, but other times you would have to change a dozen documents and you can't get it done. So that's where you need management input. Don't speak outside your area of expertise. It's easy to want to do that, particularly when there's silence, but it's better to sit there and wait till the SME comes in. I put this one in there just because it's don't talk about things in poor taste. If there's silence, again, people will start talking politics or sports, and that's never a good thing. This isn't a personal meeting. This is not a Teams meeting with your group. It's actual that the FDA are law enforcement officers, and you have to keep that in the forefront of your mind, actually. Another thing is unofficial records. Say they ask for a record on a clean room. Would you give them the record from last week? Maybe. But if it hadn't been reviewed and approved yet, no, you wouldn't. So you need to go back and really think through what records you would give them. Same for a CAPA, same for a device history record, is you should know what criteria you're going to use to pull the records. And basically also don't be argumentative is the last one, refusing to answer a question. If they're asking a legal question, a lawful question, you need to go ahead and answer it. But you could confer with your counsel or with management. Now the things that you should do, ask for clarification if a question's vague. Some inspectors, as opposed to others, like to make it harder, like to make it a little tricky and see if they can trip you up. So if a question's vague, ask for clarification. Ask for them to repeat it if you just couldn't hear it, and be honest answering them. And that sort of goes along with don't refuse to answer, but you do have to be honest. If you have an area of weakness, you'll just have to say so. Let the SMEs discuss their expertise. And this can be hard as far as being cool and calm and polite. As I said, some people like to rile you, like to try to get you, but it's okay to take a break. It's okay to say, you know, I need a 10-minute break. We'll have so-and-so here to your escort to sit with the FDA, and we need a 15-minute break. And as far as know your strengths, play them up. Or if you do have a soft spot and they seem to be pushing on that, it's okay to limit the damage, but also emphasize positives. So an example of that is, say that they're really pressing on a CAPA. This is an example. They're saying, well, you don't handle your CAPAs in a timely fashion, do you? Well, it's okay to say, you know, I understand what, you know, makes you feel this way in this situation, but we have gone ahead, we've done all the planning, we've done the corrections that are the immediate actions, we've taken correction actions, but we are still waiting for the effectiveness checks, which makes it appear untimely. But our system, our policy is to get 3 follow-ups of materials in before we can close out. So that just is one way of handling things, that you can acknowledge their opinions, but also emphasize that you've done a lot of things right. Next, please. Here's some more things that come up. And I've already mentioned being silent when the FDA is not asking questions. I don't think that's human nature to be silent when you're basically right in the moment and you have heightened emotions sometimes. So that's one thing to coach again and practice on. So the audit participants should follow the lead of the escort. Let him or her lead. Don't let the inspector go astray. Don't let the inspector be unescorted. Use those subject matter experts. And when you go to explain to the FDA the answer to the question, ideally you would have a flow chart in each of your SOPs that could just simply walk them through the answers to their question and not have them dig so hard and maybe find something else within the procedure. The other thing is they expect a prompt response. With the current technology, they're used to getting things fast, like people just putting from their electronic QMS the answers right on the wall. So I would say anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. An hour seems long to them. That's the way I've seen it in the last couple of years. Next. So after the inspection, the FDA, if they found observations, will issue a 483, and that will tell you your deficiencies. And then after that should come an inspection, establishment inspection report. If you don't get one of those, is EIRs, then you should request it. In the EIR, they will tell you, it's a little checkbox, I believe, whether there's no action indicated. So that means that there's no objectionable conditions remaining, or that there's voluntary action indicated, which means that they believe the firm is going ahead and their response is adequate to take care of the observations. So no further regulatory action is going to be recommended, or hopefully you don't get official official action indicated, because that means that they may go ahead and have in their minds or in their plans a potential for an injunction or a seizure, or some other kind of regulatory action they could take. So again, I'm going to emphasize the importance of the state of readiness. Next. So now that you've gone through the inspection, how do you respond to those 483s if you were to get a 483? Well, first off, you only have 15 working days, and that's not very long, especially if you have multiple objectionable conditions. So you need to start hustling from the time they leave. It's really just like a CAPA on steroids, I guess, that you want to look at your containment and corrections. You want to put a CAPA plan together, and then define what you're going to do at each phase. Do what you can within those 15 days. So that's the completing those actions. And then this is the key part, to make sure that your responses are systemic in nature. Don't just fix the one thing that they might have said, well, document 7.3 is out of date. I'm making that up. You have to look at all of your documents and maybe your document control system on how the improper revision has taken place. So send in all those documents. You want the FDA to make it simple for them to say, oh, in your letter, you say for observation 2 that this is what you did as exemplified in Appendix 4. They should be able to go to Appendix 4, see the appropriate CAPA for that, the old procedure, the new procedure, training forms, and the like. So if you don't make it systemic in nature, and if you don't show them what you did, the likelihood that it's going to come back with voluntary action or no action, further action, is decreased. Next. Okay, well, we are to the question and action answer section, and I believe I'm to hand it back over to Etienne.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Anne. This was great. So we did have some polls here. Did you want to use these polls, Anne, now?
Sure.
Or do you want to just go straight to questions? It's up to you.
I'll follow your lead.
Okay, well, we do have quite a few questions from the audience, so maybe we can do that. You know what, actually, let's just go ahead and ask the questions. I think that way we'll make sure we get our information. I will emphasize again that if we don't get to your question, we do have this Ask Me Anything session with Anne coming up, so feel free to forward those questions over to that when you get that email. But let's go ahead and open one of these polls up. So the first one, what is the difference between an FDA full inspection and an abbreviated inspection? I'll let you give you a moment to answer this poll. All right, is anyone seeing it? Let's see. Okay, I'm seeing some results come in. The next one is, who should be the point person during an FDA inspection? Okay, looks like 60% say director of QA, 33% FDA coordinator, 1% CEO, 4% heads, managers of all departments. Go to the next one. This is the last poll. I'll just let it go for about 20 seconds here. We've got about 50% voted. Come on, everybody, we can get everybody. All right, about 87% say state your company's policy. We'll close that poll. Okay, so hopefully everybody passed the exam that Anne had for us at the end there. But let's go to some of these questions as well that are that we have in here. So one of them is 43 always a volunteering action? How about a warning letter and consent decree? Anne?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question. Is a 43 voluntary action? Is that the question?
Yes. Is 43 always a volunteering action?
Volunteering. Well, if you don't do your 480 response properly, then it will go up the food chain, at least to probably a warning letter. But they do call it a voluntary action, an action. So on the 483 face of the document itself, it says they're inspectional observations and don't represent the final agency determination regarding compliance. So in practice, response to a 483 is not voluntary. The FDA may call it something else because they also call warning letters a way to voluntarily achieve compliance. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, yeah, kind of a semantic thing.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right. If you don't answer it, that's not good. When
I
will
would not
ISO?
suggest not answering it.
Right. The next one is, I think this one's related to QMSR. So it may be a little out of scope, but feel free to answer or however you like. When will ISO 1345 be mandatory in the States? Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I do know that the FDA is working again to merge this, not merge the systems, to align the systems. And there's an effort going forward in 2022. Whether it actually occurs in 2022, we'll have to wait and see. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's coming.
But
Another
they're pretty
question
well
here.
aligned right now. I mean, there are differences, but they're pretty well aligned.
Yeah. Okay. The next question we have is, this one's from a software as a medical device manufacturer. They say, we are a virtual medical device manufacturer. All employees work remotely. Once we receive a notification that we have an inspection, is that when the decision of an on-site or virtual audit will occur?
I am not 100% sure of that, but if you are virtual, the FDA should know because you're registered and listed, and that's what puts you on their map. I'm sure you could go to someone's home or wherever the key person is, and they'll come there, or they may change to do it virtually.
Okay. Yeah, that is an interesting kind of question as far as where they will go. So, okay.
But now that they have virtual inspections in their toolbox, it may be that they'll agree to do a virtual inspection if it's a not for cause,
Okay.
if it's a routine inspection.
Okay. Another question is kind of surrounding during the audit. So this question says, the FDA should not be allowed access to internal audit reports or management review reports. Is it their practice to ask and see what we'll say? Also, is there in the FDA practice to ask the company to sign an affidavit?
So I don't believe it's their practice to ask to see the reports themselves. They know as well as just to get a response, but they do ask to see evidence that the management reviews have been conducted, as well as the internal audit schedule and the evidence that they have been conducted. So traditionally, you give them the sign-in sheet for the management review, and they can compare those people present to the required people in the SOP. And likewise, you give them your audit schedule and the dates and who performed the audits, and they can compare those two.
Okay, great. This one is relatively straightforward. How can I get a copy of the FDA Quality System Inspection Technique Manual or Flowchart?
It's online. Just type it in Google.
Okay, that may be something we can get the link to as well. So that's great.
Sure, I'd be glad to provide that.
Okay. Next question. If our quality management system has just been implemented and we don't yet have internal audit records, et cetera, can we still get our product approved? Does our clinical study need to be completed before we get FDA approval?
Yes. You can go ahead and do that while you're, I can't remember if it was a 510K or a PMA device, but while you have submitted while you are waiting on your submission results, you could go ahead and do both your management review and audits.
Okay. Yeah, they didn't state whether it was class 2 or class 3.
I mean, you do need to sign a truth and accuracy statement that you are following the QSR, but you will be following the QSR if you haven't shipped product yet. So I don't think that's a big concern. And again, I'm not an FDA employee. I'm answering as a consultant to you.
Yeah, okay.
But I've not seen that.
Okay. Another question, this one's from David, talks about going back to the remote office. He says, I'm the management rep for the company, but I live 450 miles from the office. If an FDA inspector shows up, can we not let them in until I arrive, likely the next day?
I would not suggest that. I
Okay.
mean, it's better to request a change of date or a virtual audit than have them sort of stranded. I mean, putting yourself in those shoes, wouldn't that sort of make you irritated? They give you notice.
Yeah, it might not get you off on the right foot.
Yeah, I would fly. They give you 3 days. Either try to change the date or get there on time.
Okay.
Or ask, like I said, for virtual.
Okay. Kind of along the similar lines, I suppose, if you've never been inspected, will the inspection most likely be on site? And how many days does an inspection usually take?
If you've never been inspection, it would depend on the risk, but generally 5 days.
Okay.
It may be less if you have a lower classification of a product. But generally, I read 5 days.
Okay. This one is, in moving from a paper-based quality system to Greenlight Guru's EQMS, what would an auditor be looking for the most to make sure a proper conversion was made to the new system from paper to EQMS?
Well, the word the most always makes me wonder. but I'm a skeptical QA person, I guess. But I would think validation,
Okay,
and training.
training to the new system. Okay, that
Those
makes
two I
sense.
would highlight.
Okay. Another one, I think you might, when is software as a medical device in scope for an audit? I guess in this case, an inspection.
Well, anytime that software is not exempt, then you would have to register and list. I mean, if it's a wellness device and there's enforcement discretion, then they're not going to come in. But if it's actual medical device, then you need to register and list. And what was the second part of that question?
That's just really when is it in scope for SAMD?
Okay,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah, kind of begs the question. If it is a medical device, yeah, it is in scope. Okay, great. Here's another question. We're working on our first Class 2 510K. What is the likelihood that we will get an FDA inspection before getting clearance? And then what about after getting clearance?
I think it's very low before getting clearance. Since it's your first device on the market, you don't even need to register and list basically until you get that clearance and you start distributing product or marketing the product. And then you can see that there's a backlog. And the FDA actually told us recently that they're having a hard time keeping employees just like the rest of us are. So I would expect it to be quite a while before they came in, given that you don't have any, failures with your device or recalls.
Okay. This one is related to CAPAs. In your experience, what is the most common findings with CAPA-related 483s? Would the methodology to find the root cause investigation or implementation or effectiveness, what is the most common issue with CAPAs?
I think the answer to that is twofold. One is that people don't actually document thoroughly or evaluate thoroughly the root cause. Like they believe one thing is the root cause and they don't thoroughly look at, well, there were 5 other potentials. How did you know those weren't the root cause? Where is that documented? So that's one aspect. And the other is the timeliness. I've been in many companies where they open a CAPA, they might do the containment action, and then it sits due to resources or some other issue that just doesn't get acted upon. So those are my two thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, most of my trauma is around CAPAs. Okay. This one says, we're a very new startup. We've just established a quality management system and we don't have historical records. How should we approach this? Would this be a problem?
Well, I think that's very understandable. So until you have, sold some devices or at least built some, you wouldn't have records other than the design history file. So you do have records. You should have the design history file. And as you build product, I would say that is the area they would focus upon.
Okay. This one kind of gets into regulatory, so just however you want to answer this one. If Class 1 products do not fit into any existing product code, how do we determine if it is exempt from 510K?
I would like to not answer that right now.
Sure,
I
that's
don't
fine.
honestly, I mean, there is a mechanism that you can do that. You can do a 513G, and that's probably the best approach I would recommend. So if there's not a category you believe out there, I would pick the one. You can also do a Q-sub. So there's ways that you can find that out. as far as confirming the classification or the actual pro code.
Okay.
513G is the shortest mechanism.
Okay. This one was asked earlier on, but it was related to, I believe, the slide when you were talking about how well, I'll just skip to the question. Can you explain the binomial distribution for sampling? And I believe it's related to the FDA's decision to when to
Yes, and I
inspect.
said that related to the QSIT approach, and the binomial is basically a method where it's a yes or no answer. So it's not a variable, it is a distinct yes or no. So,
Okay.
and
Great.
then they can pick the confidence level of 99 or 95 or, and the number of failures.
Okay. This question is, what advice do you have for contract internal auditors who audit 1345 to assist clients in preparation for FDA audits?
So they're contract ISO auditors. I would say you could perform the audit in the same way for an internal audit to the GMPs. You just have to know the slight differences between them. So you would have to know that, actually I have a little list here. With ISO, they're not law enforcement. And with the ISO, for example, the FDA's response they look at complaints rather than feedback. You'd have to know that, when you go in, the FDA believes in more self-policing. So there are very few differences technically between the two, other than the compliance with other regulatory systems. So ISO always says and other regulatory bodies. The FDA is concerned about the FDA. So you wouldn't have to go look at what they've done in Brazil because they ship in Brazil, for example. I'm not sure if I fully answered that, but I tried to.
Okay. No, I think that makes sense. Yeah, everybody's going to have their own focus. So yeah, that makes sense.
Right, the FDA uses a bottom-up approach traditionally, whereas ISO will look at a top-down approach. So there are some differences, but as far as the meat of 1345 and 21 CFR 820, there are not that many significant differences. I think they're like, I'm not going to quote how aligned they are, but a lot.
Okay. And do you mind going into just a little bit more detail about the bottom-up approach, what that means versus a top-down? I think that would be maybe helpful for our listeners.
Okay, so the FDA is going to pick a subsystem, and then they'd go through records. Whereas in ISO, they would always go, maybe not always, but they would traditionally go and say, let's see your policy, let's see your quality manual, let's see your SOP, and then let's see your records showing that you comply with that SOP.
That makes sense. Okay. Okay, another question is kind of along the same lines, FDA versus 1345. Are you less likely to be inspected by FDA if you have a 1345 certification?
No.
Okay.
Because remember, the FDA their goal is to make sure that the systems and the devices are safe and effective in U.S. commerce, and that their officers, they're of the U.S. So they're badge carrying members of the a law enforcement agency. So they're really might be interested in what ISO auditors, and you remember the ISO auditors, the FDA or inspectors found, but that doesn't change their inspection methods or frequency.
That makes sense. Okay. This question I thought was interesting. We are a small company and we outsource our regulatory to a consultant. What is the best course of action if the consultant is not present during the FDA inspection?
Well, I would joke, get them in the room. Because we do that. If our clients, we offer to help them. And so if they're following our recommendations, why would a company not bring in their best team to deal with the FDA is always a mystery to me.
That makes sense. If it was unannounced, is there ever an option to have someone, um, maybe it's an in-person audit, but can that one person be virtual on the screen?
Sure. I was called, let's see, the week before Christmas once for one of our clients, and they thought they could handle this inspection. They called me after one day. I flew up that night and I remained on site for, the next until Christmas Eve, I think, or so. I mean, it was like 4 or 5 days on site. So I would suggest that you either get them on your team's meeting to sit in, or, there's airplanes.
Definitely, definitely. Travel is an option. Okay, great answer. Um, Another question is, um, would FDA mostly audit against 21 CFR 820, or are there other titles and chapters in their scope? For example, maybe Part 11.
Yes, they would definitely include Part 803, which is your MDRs, and Part 11, Part 806 recalls, or is that sorry, I give that one up. But they would definitely look at all of the surrounding, um, 806 is corrections and removals. That's what I meant to say. 803, tracking we discussed if that was relevant, and Part 11.
It's really anything that's relevant to your specific device. Is that accurate?
They would also, just 1 second, please, they'd look at your UDI and Part 830 as well.
Okay,
They wouldn't go out and look at your 510Ks or like things generally beyond the scope of an inspection.
okay. Well, you answered another question with that, because the next question was, will UDI compliance typically be covered? So that makes sense. Okay, let's see. How should you, and you may have already answered this, how should you perform internal audits if you only have one QA/RA person? Do you need to bring in a consultant?
Yes. Basically, you have to be independent of the area. The auditor has to be independent of the areas audited. So that does happen frequently. And so, yeah, you would hire someone that's an second party auditor or consultant.
Okay. And on that same vein of thought, can a consultant serve as management representative, or should only a full-time employee be appointed as the management rep?
Funny that question is asked, because technically in 82020, it says that um, the management rep has to have the ability, I don't have it right in front of me, but they have to have the ability to make changes to the QMS. So as and affect the outcome of the QMS. So as a consultant, it's very hard to do that. So we do not ever take on that obligation of management representative. We've been acting quality managers. And I again jokingly said, if I'm on a board of directors of a company, then I would do it, because then I can affect the outcome and affect the leadership of that company's quality management system.
Great point. Great point. Someone had a quick follow-up to the previous question about the one QA/RA person. I know the answer was the independent field. They have to be able to audit that. Could you possibly train someone in another group to audit quality?
Yes, you could do that. As long as they have the qualifications, say someone from engineering could audit.
Sure. Okay. Uh, this one's more along the MDSAP program. Are you less likely to be inspected by the FDA if you're under the MDSAP program?
To be frank, I am not sure that answer.
Okay, that's fair.
I would be glad to follow up though.
Okay. Sounds good. Let's see here. I'm trying to understand this question. Can PAI and GMP inspection be clubbed together by FDA? If yes, then how long does it extend?
I'm not sure I understand that question either.
Okay. All right, we'll follow up then. Some of these we may need to follow up just for clarification to get you the best answer possible. So
Okay.
um, let's see. This one looks like, and I'm not sure if they mean, well, I'll read the question first. What would an initial importer expect during an FDA inspection? So I don't know if that's someone importing into the US or importing to another country.
That's imported into the US.
Okay.
I wouldn't, I would like to follow up on that. My initial answer is that I wouldn't expect the initial importer to be inspected unless there's some type of issue.
Okay. Sounds good. Let's see. So some of the other questions are somewhat repeats. So I don't want to be too redundant here, but another question is, how do you document if someone has the qualification to perform certain job functions related to FDA compliance? We document completion of FDA training, but do you need to provide evidence of education, skills, etc.?
Um, in that question, the word need versus should or best practices, I think, is a little bit confusing.
Hmm.
And that it would always be best to show that they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities, and that, for example, your engineers have engineering degrees. And I once went in to an animal study facility and checked the veterinarian's training file. They didn't even have a copy of his veterinary license. So
Oh,
you should have more than training to a once a year thing for those people that are in charge of the quality or regulatory systems.
okay. That makes sense.
You know,
Uh, Go ahead.
some additional training over the years would be reasonable to expect.
Okay. Next question, how often do class 1 devices get audited? Is there a breakdown available as far as class 1 versus class 2 versus class 3?
I'd have to look that up, but much less frequently than, as the risk level goes up, so do the frequencies of inspections. I've worked in heart valves, like I mentioned, and they seemed like they were getting, that was a long time ago, but they were getting like every 2-year inspections. But class 2 get less, frequent, maybe every 3 years, even though they're aiming for 2. And class 1s, sometimes I don't even know if they get inspected very frequently, but I'll look for that breakdown to give you actual data.
Okay. We got several questions around software, and this one maybe encompasses some of this. If a product includes software, what are the common topics that will probably be covered during the audit? And maybe if you could give maybe a compare and contrast, is there a difference in the audit when it is a software as a medical device versus a physical product?
Well, the process of auditing, are you talking about an FDA inspection or an internal audit?
I mean, they didn't
The
specify, but let's
process
go with
of,
FDA inspection. Yeah.
oh, okay. The process of auditing or inspection in and of itself, or method, probably would not significantly change. But what the documents they are looking for and the content would differ. For example, if you're looking at software, you would look for the uh, architecture diagram, and that, you know, wouldn't apply to hardware device. So you would look at, you know, the software requirements document, the architecture diagram, things like that. The V&V testing would be looked at regardless of whether it was hardware or software. So I think you just have to focus on your design control deliverables that differ from one another, as well as the level of concern on your software. And if you follow ISO 62304 for your software, I believe that's the correct standard for best practices.
Okay. And it almost goes, by extension, if you started comparing sterile versus non-sterile devices, some of those deliverables will change. So,
Exactly.
okay, just really the difference in device, not so much the method of delivery to the
All
patient.
right. So if it's sterile, you have to follow ISO 11607, whereas non-sterile, you don't. So yeah, I think it's more product related than process related.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's something that we talk about a lot. Is software as a medical device is a medical device. So
Mm-hmm. Correct.
okay. Um, there are also several questions around QMSR, so we don't have to go too far into this, but maybe you can offer your thoughts here. What changes in inspections should we anticipate, or do you anticipate, as the FDA rewrites its regulations to incorporate ISO 13485? Do you anticipate QSIT changing, or what changes should we expect?
I don't think they're far enough along to my knowledge, to know exactly what would change. Um, Again, the method of QSIT wouldn't necessarily change because that's how they're going to do an inspection. But I certainly could be wrong. The article I read on the FDA website relating to this is that they're trying to line it, and I don't know that they know the answers to all of those questions as of yet.
Okay. Yeah, still speculation right now. Okay. Let's see here. Let's maybe make this the one of our last questions here. Could FDA ask for HR records such as CVs?
Yes,
Okay.
they can't look necessarily at reviews, but that goes to knowledge, ability, skills, and abilities. So CVs would be fair game.
Okay. And one more related to software. If you receive the validation report from the software developer, do you have to perform your own validation as well?
I would say that depends. Um, if the developer did the verification on the software itself, and then you incorporate that into a system, you would, a hardware software system, then you would have to do some additional verification validation. But if it's software as a medical device, which is just truly software, you may be able to write a rationale for not conducting additional verification.
Okay. All right. Um, Last one. Let's see here. What
Making it
is
easy.
FDA? Go ahead. Yeah. What is distance education considered as official in a CV?
Could you reread that, please?
Is distance education, I assume that means remote education, considered as official in a CV?
Sure. You can go to week-long training classes online, and those would count. Or
Okay.
you can go to this webinar, and you may be able to count that.
Okay.